Venture Smith's descendants, many of them have been identified not only in Connecticut but throughout the country, and they have joined in this effort, very supportive. And this is a picture of them at Venture Smith's gravesite in East Haddam, and it's a remarkable picture because it has young and old and just a whole range of people that approve of the project, are happy to see the participation now of people from Africa, people from the UK, and they're thrilled that this story of their ancestor who couple hundred years ago came here, and the story's alive and becoming more alive.
Yeah.
So with that, David,
yes,
now it's your turn.
Yeah, I'd just like to link into that about the Venture Smith descendants, because we've been trailing around with 4 or 5 of them, 2 especially, Corinne and Angie. Hi guys. They've been warmth and generosity itself, and that really made us feel very welcome. I'm a guy who has been for 25 years running what amounts to an arts and crafts promotion of indigenous peoples, in fact 26 countries altogether, but I concentrated myself on West Africa, and especially Ghana, Burkina, Mali, Niger, and a little bit in Côte d'Ivoire. And I've been, for all of that time, showing by the artifacts we've been able to export to the UK, the great strengths of these African tribes. In fact, the tribes most of the slaves came from. So my actual vision and project has been to go back to these tribal areas and see where they're at now. And of course, what I found, shockingly, in this case 22 years ago, was that they'd been entirely neglected. In fact, in my head, they'd been forgotten. And yet we were concentrating, as it were, on our UK or our America end of the equality, which of course is absolutely essential. But I was then beginning to concentrate on how we could develop the things they needed out in the tribes where they've been neglected. And so in those remote places, we've been trying to establish, if you like, a voice of the people, a voice of their young people, a voice of their elders and their chiefs. And from all of that, gleaning all this information over many visits and staying with them, because that's what we do. We stay in the villages and become part of their families. Out of that has become an essential, what shall I say, model or skeleton framework of what they really would like to see. And I describe it as 3 T's. The first T is they'd like to see education, training, and they have none. So what we have now is fantastic technology which could change the face of their whole areas. And in this case, we're partnering with a guy called Seth Owusu from Washington, who runs a group called EVCO, and they're providing what we hope will be a huge chain of solar-powered computer systems with an education thing on it also from America. So this is where you get all these tie-ups. It's a well possible system where if you plug a little USB into a computer, out comes the equivalent in this case of 84,000 learning books. The whole of Wikipedia, or almost any question a teacher or a young person would want to ask in the future to develop their sense of place in the world and their sense of village. So that's the first T, training, absolutely essential. Neglected, they have none. The second one that really turns me on as an ecologist is trees. And I got the idea, and we've started it, of trying to plant in indigenous African trees, fruit trees, all kinds of value trees, in the African bush again, because most of it's been cut down. So, and that's the neglect there. But if we grow and plant, in this case 10, 11 million trees, representing each slave who left, or each person who was captured as a slave and left through places like Anamabo. Anamabo having the most people ever to go through one place, I think. But that's so symbolic. So now we're making inroads into the idea of in ecology and agriculture, and I've got many professionals involved in this, we can in fact start growing in tree nurseries the actual indigenous trees that have been left in little spots around Ghana, and we can start to actually grow them, get the schools involved, get the teachers involved, and then start to replant them on what is a main slave route. Now we're only trying one, there's several hundred. So the one we're trying is, hopefully you can see this, in Ghana, and Ghana is roughly the size of Great Britain, and we start in Anamabo, where I basically came straight down to and found out about Venture Smith, and we go right up directly north, almost on the Greenwich Meridian, and you get right into the Sahara, and along that route we have at least 60 or 70 main villages. In fact, what we call 10 hub villages, who will carry the can for these 3 T's. So you've got it, training, you've got the trees. Now the last thing is, they don't have adequate transport. The roads aren't enough to cope with development. And out in the remote areas where the tribes are, there is almost no transport at all unless you have a bike or a motorbike. So what we've come up with, and what my vision was, having had to go in lots of dugout canoes across rivers, was, wow, we could so easily get river transport just like we did in UK and Europe 200 odd years ago. And we've actually got the means to do it now. In fact, the first ambulance boat on the White Volta River, their main river, is going to arrive there this year. And because of that, and just one story about it in our newspapers, Scottish Sea Farms have donated 2 more big river boats. All we need are engines. And then we can go and survey 100 villages that haven't seen the light of day. When I went to Singer, which is a prison village across the White Volta, linked to Anamabo, when I went to Singer, I was the first white guy they'd seen in '96. And I've been going ever since, become one of the family, but that's one of our 10 hubs. Now, if we station the boats up there, you're going to open up what effectively in 70 miles is 3 different tribes with 3 different languages. But they're all tribes that were the progenitors of the slaves. They've been weakened. The people who are slaves are being empowered. I'm not going to say fully empowered, but they are being empowered. And thank God for that history of equality growing. But the guys who are left behind, tens of thousands of them, need attention. And that's what I'm dedicating the rest of my life to do.
Now, I think that's a wonderful story, because when we read about the slave trade, as it's called, we think about the people that were taken and the horror of all of that, and how cut off they were with no families, and yet the people from which they were taken, no one talks about them. And I've learned so much from this conference when people mention that. The families, can you imagine your wife, your children, you taken away, and who's left behind? The tragedy, the sadness, and the lack of people to do things and to become educated and to increase all of these things that you're talking about now would normally have happened, but with the removal of so many people, I mean, it's terrible.
It comes right down to the present day. One of the chiefs, Chief David in Nakpandori, wonderful guy, a medical person, said to me, and when I was speaking to the local school, David, my tribe, my family has not recovered yet. They took 90% of our young men away. And how do you recover from that? And that's why they need so much input now. And the point is, we've got the means to do it, and that's what turns me on.
Well, it's a wonderful beginning, and this should have been done by
many years ago.
all around the world, hundreds of years ago.
But like myself, we remained in ignorance. But that's why I want to open it up, and that's why I'm making films about it.
Congratulations.
So thanks for this opportunity, Dorothy.
Thank you.